It started with one man's vision.
This is in the summer of 1975, and I actually concluded that I should start the company in 1982. And sure enough, that's exactly what I did.
EA laid the kind of DNA foundation pretty different than the other companies.
Trip was and is a visionary.
They played by their own rules.
Where we're going to answer the question that we asked in our original recruiting ad, which is, can a computer make you cry?
And reinvented the entire game industry.
That was really the birth of EA Sports. It was the first time in the industry that celebrities had been used in a game.
They've had this kind of core success in these core franchises that have allowed them to become experimental.
There were tough times.
EA's ultimate success and even existence was in doubt.
But their perseverance paid off big. This is the story of Electronic Arts.
The EA machine works. It is unstoppable. It's like a giant battleship that's turning its guns, and when it starts firing, you do not want to be on the beach.
In the late 1970s, two students have a chance meeting.
I was at Stanford Business School. We had a professor, a decision analysis guy, brilliant guy. And in class one time he looked around and said, "You Stanford kids, you all worry about money. So I'm gonna ask you a different question. If it weren't for money, what would you like to do?" And he came to me and I said, "I'd like to help create this kind of adult Disneyland where you're in a story, kind of an athletic participant in a story, but the computer creates the environment, the people around you." And there's just silence in the class, like, "Whew, boy, is he ever out of it?" And this guy came up to me afterwards and said, "I've never heard that before." So there's one other kid in our class, and one of the other classes said something similar to that. You gotta go talk to him. And that was Trip Hawkins.
While Trip was at Stanford, he had dreams of starting his own software company.
And I started thinking, wow, if you can actually go to a store and get a terminal and take it home, then that's exactly what I've been waiting for. I want to be able to make games for home computers. I went back to my desk and I spent the afternoon figuring out how long it would take for there to be enough of these computers in homes that I could start my game company. And this is in the summer of 1975, and I actually concluded that I should start the company in 1982. And sure enough, that's exactly what I did.
When we got out of Stanford, he said, 5 years, I'm gonna start a software company, get ready. So I did various this and that. 5 years later, he called up and said, "Okay, I'm getting 6 other people together who want to talk about starting a company. Do you want to come?" I said yes. 3 months later, he started the company and I came in.
After working at Apple Computer, Trip starts Amazing Software in 1982, right on schedule.
After I hired several employees and people had to answer the phone and say, "Amazing Software," people were thinking, I think this name's kind of silly and we should have a different name.
And the way they go about changing their name is a bit unusual.
There were about a dozen employees, and we had a rule, which was that we were going to stay up all night if necessary until we all agreed on a new name. And that you could go to bed if you wanted, but if you went to bed, you would lose your vote. So it was actually not until about 2 o'clock in the morning that everybody that was still awake agreed that the name should be Electronic Arts.
Electronic Arts is poised to turn the video game world upside down, playing by their own rules.
Probably the riskiest decision that I made in starting EA was the decision to sell directly to retailers. And at that point in time, nobody was doing that. Everybody sold to distributors who then sold to the retailers. I had studied these other media industries like records and books and noticed that the leaders all had control of their distribution.
EA laid the kind of DNA foundation pretty different than the other companies. So at EA, Trip started out keeping, I think it was 15% of the company. Trip took about 1/3 of what other founders did and basically laid the financial DNA for a big organization.
Electronic Arts also quickly realizes the importance of presentation and packaging for video games.
My thought there was that here we have packaging that's very unsophisticated for games at that time. A lot of it was just in Ziploc bags. I thought, well, number one, I don't want to spend a lot of money on the packaging, and number two, I want to have something that has more impact, that makes people think that it's a creative product. Well, hey, records sell for less than $10, so why can't we just use record packaging?
First time I heard about EA was when their first batch of games came out. They had this big press campaign about digital artists that can computer make you cry, and they had the record album looking packages.
When EA started, there was a whole different philosophy of actually having a professional organization that started out thinking about the complete process of publishing. Part of that was that attitude of how you promote the artists.
The upstart game company also makes it a point to treat developers as artists and promote them accordingly.
I was applying a lot of thinking just from looking at the music business and the book business and trying to figure, well, what are they doing and why does it work for them and how can we apply that to what we're doing?
He brought in producers from A&M Records to teach the producers at EA how to develop artist and repertoire, because no one had ever used the title producer before. So the handful of us who were fortunate enough to be the early producers at EA were the first people ever to have that job in the industry, because Trip Hawkins was the first one to see that that was what was needed to guide products through, the same way that was in film and the way it was in music.
Terms like affiliate label, producer, director, those are terms that are still used today in the game industry.
By 1983, EA is releasing games like Hard Hat Mac and the highly regarded strategy game Mule.
Mule by Ozark Softscape and Dan Button, which got a complete aspect into players negotiating with each other through a very simple interface within the game. I talk to more game designers still today, 20 years later. If you ask them what was a game that they respect or that influenced them in their careers, a lot of people go back and talk about Mule.
Everything is going well for the young company, but the roughest times are yet to come.
It was the fall of 1983, and the video game business was crashing around our ears. Bad games were flooding the market, and sales were just dropping.
In 1983, Electronic Arts releases a game that sets the standard for sports games to come. Dr. J and Larry Bird go one-on-one.
That was really the birth of what became EA Sports. And it was the first time in the industry that celebrities had been used in a game.
Graphically, it was very simplistic compared to what we were used to in the coin-op world. They were actually taking real stats and applying them to a game, trying to bring it to life, made it more real. It was really an interesting idea.
That game ended up being a big success for us. It was really our first genuine hit product.
Not long after the success of Dr. J and Larry Bird, the video game market takes a turn for the worse.
The whole decade of the 1980s, EA's ultimate success and even existence was in doubt.
It was the fall of 1983, and the video game business was crashing around our ears. The cartridge business had been suffocated in that tremendous oversupply of product from new people. Bad games were flooding the market, and sales were just dropping. And PCs were just starting to catch fire in the homes and take off.
EA survives by capitalizing on the rise of computers with popular PC titles like Archon in 1984 and The Bard's Tale in 1985. Building on the success of Dr. J and Larry Bird go one-on-one, Trip pursues another sports legend, John Madden.
Being a serious football fan, I wanted to make a real football game, a much more sophisticated game. That's why I wanted to recruit a coach like John Madden to help make sure we got all of the details of authenticity right.
So he got the Madden, and Madden, of course, thought he was a total dweeb. But Trip rode across country on the train with Madden, talking football all the time. So after an hour on the train with Trip, he realized Trip was also a football fanatic. And Trip came back with, a 3-ring binder full of notes. So we decided to work with him. Then after the deal's done, Trip goes in and says, "Okay, coach, here's your game." Madden said, "Where's all the guys? It's 7-on-7. Trip goes, "Yeah, this is, on these computers, this is all we do now." And Madden said, "No, you can't ship a game with my name on it that's not real football.
We had such an ambitious undertaking. It took 4 years to make the game.
It was almost killed a number of times.
And it became known in the company as Trip's Folly. Everyone in the company thought we should just give up and forget the whole thing. And I was just very determined to make it work.
But it was really his baby.
When we go back to the original PC versions, the men's series was more of a novelty. When it first came out, it was not a huge success back then. Sports and video game players were not the same crowd.
Although Electronic Arts survives the 80s by developing for the PC, the video game market is rapidly becoming more and more console-heavy.
Up until that time, EA was strictly a computer company. We did no console work. A bunch of us, including Larry Probst, who was a sales guy at the time, he and I and a few others were, pretty vociferous about wanting to take EA from this little, what we called a boutique software, company into a bigger mass market console company. Trip goes, okay, figure out what you want to do and let's do it. I think you guys are, finally right. We've got this experience in sports, we better stick with it and really go after it, because that was one area where we felt secure that we could beat any competition.
We're developing the first set of sequels for EA Sports lineup on the Sega Genesis. So the first discussion was, a guy named Rich Hillman and I are sitting around and I said, we should do Madden again next year. And Rich goes, that would make sense. We went to everybody else in EA and they went, so football 2 years in a row? Nah, it'll never work. But we insisted. So we set off to do Madden football and said, well, as long as we're doing that, let's do another hockey and let's do another basketball.
And with that,
EA Sports
was born.
The culture at EA sort of really took off when EA Sports sort of found its center.
After the successful launch of EA Sports, Trip sets his sights on hardware.
It was a play I viewed as a way of taking Electronic Arts to the next stage as a software company, because the most valuable software companies, Microsoft and Sony, are involved in the hardware business. They're involved in the platform business. They don't just make application software. I thought, hey, why shouldn't we bid for that?
Development of the 3DO begins within EA and becomes Trip's pet project.
That's a very risky thing to do. So there was disagreement at the board level and within the management team about the risks associated with that.
Two things happened at Trip. I think the first thing is he got bored. It looked like we had 3 years of easy sailing on Genesis. There wasn't enough for him to do. He's a real creative and energetic guy. He was demotivated from being a CEO of a company that wanted to grow, and he had this vision about what became 3DO. And then as he got into 3DO, it just obviously became a conflict.
Something had to be done with 3DO to turn it into a more viable company, and it was clear that that was going to take a lot of focus, and I just didn't feel comfortable that I could just abandon it.
In the end, when given a choice, do you want to change the world again, this time with a hardware company, or, kind of do this cyclical growth thing with EA, he chose 3DO.
That's really how I ended up separating from EA. I mean, it wasn't something that I planned in advance to work out that way.
A lot of people use the word visionary very loosely, and the word is thrown out in a very casual way. Trip was and is a visionary in that a lot of things that came to pass, Trip did see them long before they came to pass. And his batting average for being able to view how events would unfold was so high, plus his ability to motivate people to go out and try and make that vision of the world happen. So that's the way I think of him, as somebody who actually truly deserves the word visionary.
In 1991, Trip Hawkins leaves the company he founded to embark on a new venture, placing Electronic Arts in uncertain hands.
We did a really rocky transition in the early 90s from the founding CEO to a new CEO. Made for a really hard 3 years.
After Trip Hawkins leaves to start 3DO, EA quickly fills the gap.
My impression of EA after Trip Hawkins is that Larry Probst took over the helm, and Larry Probst is an amazing leader.
Larry Probst, who's the CEO of the company, and sort of really kind of grew the company from a couple of $100 million to where it is today, nearly $3 billion in revenue. He's a sort of phenomenal figure, very balanced, very fair, very hard.
Under new leadership, Electronic Arts continues to dominate the industry and pursues talented outside developers.
That's when EA realized that they should start making periodic acquisitions to just beef up the product line and beef up the internal development resources and add more brands.
They almost kind of started that campaign with Origin. I think they had a lot of disruption and chaos that happened after the Origin acquisition. And the important thing is they learned from it, I think, so that when they started doing their next acquisitions, they had a much better sense of kind of what to look out for.
With the acquisition of Origin, EA continues the popular Ultima series and releases the first ever massively multiplayer online role-playing game, Ultima Online.
It did what role-playing games have been trying to do for a long time, is kind of recreate that original little community experience of people sitting down and playing. It finally got it.
In 1990, EA acquires Distinctive Software, a Canadian-based company.
Don Matrick, who had founded Distinctive Software as a child prodigy and then run it for 10 years. Matrick called up Trip and said, you guys should acquire us.
Distinctive Software, which is EA Canada today, and it is the largest video game studio in the world. They do have a lot of the big-time titles. They're a workhorse for EA, NBA Live, Need for Speed, Def Jam, FIFA, MVP Baseball.
He delivers, gives it a ride, deep to center, shades of Willie Mays.
What EA's done in terms of buying the developers, it's been very successful. They've worked with the developers on multiple SKUs. It's given them time to get to know each other and understand whether or not they're synergists, rather than just go out there and chase after the hit developer who's got big million-unit seller last year and just buy them outright.
In 1997, EA buys Maxis, the developer of the SimCity series.
It was actually pretty impressive, the group of people they brought into Maxis. About 4 sharp people replaced about 10 vice presidents that we had at the time, and generally did a better, more focused job of running the company. Because of that, Maxis, as a studio, was able to get much more focused on what we were good at.
Under Electronic Arts, Maxis releases SimCity 3000 and the best-selling PC game of all time, The Sims. And EA helps change the makeup of the industry.
Which came first, the chicken or the egg, you know? Is EA gobbling up developers, thus changing the industry, or is the industry changing, thus requiring EA to gobble up the developers?
You know, I'd always seen EA as kind of like the Death Star. You know, like this large monolith kind of going around and gobbling up things. You know, what I didn't realize until they acquired us was they, in fact, were being run by very smart people.
Other key acquisitions made by EA include Peter Molyneux's company, Bullfrog, and the Florida-based Tiburon, known for bringing the Madden franchise to the next-generation consoles.
Madden NFL 2001 has a special place just because of, it really put our company, Electronic Arts Tiburon, on the map as one of the premier sports games developers. You know, that was a huge achievement. A lot of hard work. It really kind of set the pace for sports gaming on next-gen consoles.
All next-gen consoles were not blessed with Madden, though.
And he dropped it.
Electronic Arts decided not to develop games for Sega's Dreamcast, despite the company's success on the Sega Genesis.
There are a couple negatives about the Dreamcast. The first was we'd lost a little faith in Sega's management because they had done the 32 acts, they did the Sega CD, they kept kind of cycling this new stuff and kind of changing their story about where they were going to put their emphasis. The Dreamcast, for a while there, was going to be an online machine at launch. They made too many changes for us to stay confident. Meanwhile, Sony, what they said they were going to ship, they never changed their message on the PlayStation.
For Electronic Arts, one of the things that we've prided ourselves on is being platform agnostic. We think that our responsibility is to create the best software experiences for consumers.
They've had this kind of core success in these core franchises that they've nurtured and that have allowed them to become experimental.
With several best-selling franchises under its belt, EA continues its dominance in the game industry with a variety of big-name licenses.
They obviously moved a lot more towards licenses with the Lord of the Rings franchises. And James Bond. Harry Potter. That's taken up a lot more of the growth of the company.
I think we've been the leader in innovation in the industry. We've kind of invented movie games. Before Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings, movie games all sucked. And they came out late. And we still see highly anticipated movie games that still suck. The appetite for innovation and risk-taking in EA in the last 5 years has changed pretty dramatically.
Today, Electronic Arts continues to expand its reach into the video game community. This gaming giant now has over 4,400 employees worldwide, and it's showing no signs of slowing down.
This company has a future. Electronic Arts, I think, is now institutionalized learning habits, marketing habits that can withstand kind of the transition between generations.
At EA in the next 5 years, we're going to get to the place where we're going to answer the question that we asked in our original recruiting ad, which is, can a computer make you cry?
What makes EA successful is that they have a good mix of the right people and a good mix of the right personalities. EA's success is a gestalt of those people.
As a producer, it's a pretty impressive thing when the EA machine works for you. It's very gratifying if you've just poured your heart and soul into something for the last 12 to 24 months to see this machine fire up. It's like a giant battleship that's turning its guns, and when it starts firing, you do not want to be on the beach.
I'm kind of amazed at what has happened. That's beyond my wildest dreams, and it's totally exhilarating.
Phone, 1.2 megapixel camera, and holds 5,000 MP3s.
Wow, that's really impressive. Oh, hold on a second, sorry. Hello? Yeah, hey, I'm in the middle of lunch. Can I call you back? All right, cool, thanks. So that's a lot of MP3s.
Yeah.
See the best, greatest, biggest, shiniest, coolest, and blinkiest new stuff coming next year when the Screensavers goes live at the Consumer Electronics Show. Coming up next.
Hold on, let me put you on speakerphone.